I want to talk about a story, and I've talked about it once as it appeared in the Atlantic, and now National Review has done more. Ian Tuttle and National Review has done more on the November cover story at the Atlantic, the elite college students who can't read books. Let me just give you the synopsis here now. Many students no longer arrive at college, even at highly selective elite colleges, prepared to read books, Rose Horowitz reports. She means whole books, cover to cover. It's not that they don't want to do the reading, it's that they don't know how. Expectations that were once routine, that students could competently and sympathetically read and discuss whole volumes from Pride and Prejudice to Crime and Punishment, are now unsustainable. Many students no longer command the powers of concentration or possess the linguistic skills to engage the standard texts. Professors, yielding to the situation, are shrinking and cutting assignments. Horowitz notes correctly the problem begins long before college. In 1976, about 40% of high school seniors said they had read at least 6 books for fun in the previous year, compared with 11.5% who hadn't read any. By 2022, those percentages had flipped. Reading for pleasure is even seen as a niche interest. I'm sorry. For those of you in Rio Linda, it's niche interest. The hemorrhoids are offended. Reading for pleasure is even seen as a niche interest. A couple of professors told me their students see reading books as akin to listening to vinyl records, something that a small subculture may still enjoy, but that's mostly a relic of an earlier time. No single cause is behind such a trend, but it is not hard to see that nearly every aspect of our educational culture discourages patient, attentive reading. High schools and middle schools have spent years phasing out books, often in response to the imposition of standardized testing. As one teacher tells Horowitz, there's no testing skill that can be related to can you sit down and read Tolstoy. This trend is abetted by the widely adopted college and career-ready educational program that has left many students prepared for neither. Among students headed to elite colleges, there are additional pressures, ferocious competition for acceptance to prestigious institutions, driven by a sense that long-term success is impossible without an Ivy League degree, promotes GPA obsession. For the same reason, students are subjected, often beginning in elementary school, to a punishing regime of extracurricular activities in the attempt to compose a resume that can survive the gimlet eye of the nation's last true gatekeepers, admissions counselors, and then there are the phones. What does not come up and what should come up is Common Core. Common Core has been terrible. Common Core has been an absolute disaster for our public schools and private schools. Private schools are adopting Common Core as well. I got a friend of mine who's enrolled his kids in a school, and turns out they're doing Common Core math, and neither he nor his wife can help the kids. Our kids had a similar situation. We wound up moving them to a different school. And you know what's the most infuriating thing about it is that a lot of these schools that use Common Core, they just lie. They flat out lie to you. They tell you it's not Common Core, it's the Singapore system. You know, those kids in Singapore are smart. Or it's not Common Core, it's Community Core. That's the ticket. It's not Common Core, it's Jeffersonian Applied Mathematics. Whatever the hell that is. And they just lie, and it's Common Core. And there are teachers who will defend it. There are math teachers who will defend it. And you know what they're actually defending is they're defending their ability to take your children and educate them in ways that you can no longer educate them. And so your children can be convinced teacher's smart, mom and dad are dumb. I've explained a lot on this program the problems with Common Core math. And my God, the teachers who love it have embraced it, and it is a cult. It is an absolute cult. They will defend it till they're blue in the mouth, and what they cannot defend and what they dance around and try to avoid answering for is that you, the parent, are incapable of helping your child with their math homework. It has separated you from the ability to help your child, which is actually a critical life skill and a developmental building skill for family trust. And they've cut you out of the process, and they do not give a damn about you. They do not give a damn that you are no longer allowed to help your child with math. All they care about is they found a newfangled way that makes them the smartest person in the room. But let's talk about the reading stuff because I talk about the math a lot. Common Core reading embraces short synopses and articles and relevant news stories. So instead of, for example, reading Pride and Prejudice, you may read an article from Time magazine, and I bet you know the political orientation of the literature being read. You may read an encyclopedia entry. If you read a work of fiction, you're going to read a short story. You're not going to read a lengthy story. The reason is because what Common Core does is it prioritizes the ability to do quick analysis of material. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Give it to me now. What Common Core devalues is plot and narrative and character development. Why? Because plot and narrative and character development are not critical skills in the workforce. And Common Core elevated teaching your children to be good little automatons ahead of actually being creative, thoughtful people with an entrepreneurial American spirit. So we can't sit down and read Moby Dick because Moby Dick is too long and the second word of the title is inappropriate. And we would have to ask questions about who is Ishmael and why does he start the book Call Me Ishmael, and why does the captain obsess with the whale, and what are the themes and what are the allusions, what are the allegories, what are we learning on a moral basis, what about the character development? No. We got to read an article from Time magazine about global warming from 10 years ago, and what do we learn, and who are the protagonists, and where does it stand now, and give me a quick analysis. And then there's the accelerated reader program where your kids are encouraged to read as many books as possible, and they're recommended to read books on their age level, and here's why. Let's say you have a child who actually is an accelerated reader. You have a third grader who's reading on a sixth grade level. Your child is going to actually be penalized if your child reads the sixth grade level books because you can't read as many of them because they're thicker books. So your kid is forced to read as many of the grade level books as possible. They certainly get more points for reading the advanced material, but it takes longer to read. And so at their grade level, they're penalized because they can't read as many books. So what Common Core is encouraging your children to do is to be dumbed down to grade level instead of being advanced, because despite their claims that you get awarded extra points with the accelerated reader program for reading bigger books, you actually get penalized because you're not reading as many books. It's been a disaster for education. Your children are not encouraged to sit and meditate on a book. They're encouraged to rush through it as quickly as possible. Side note, tangent, I guess you will. So going to seminary, and I'm looking at starting back my classes next semester. I learned to read books by reading the book, digesting it. What I learned in grad school, starting with law school, is you got to be able, some of these books that you're reading for grad school, you got to be able to read them very quickly. You can't sit there and like meditate on each page. You just got to go. Read the first sentence or two of every paragraph. Read the last sentence of the paragraph. It's a well-run book. You'll get the gist. Move. And it just burned me out on reading for pleasure. But one of the critical skills for middle and high school is to get a kid to read a book cover to cover. And along the way, they learn, what is this book about? And when they start to talk about what the book is about, they start to learn what a plot is. When they start to learn characters, they begin to learn character development. And when they learn character development, they learn who a protagonist is. What is a protagonist? Who is the protagonist of this book? Who is the antagonist? How do they relate in the plot? Those aren't testable skills, but they're actually necessary life skills. Because what you learn in reading the classics is, one, how very few new ideas there are, and two, you understand how narratives develop. And 3, once you've understood how narratives develop, you understand the flow of the news better. You're less likely to be spoon-fed information. And then you're less likely to come to these crazy conclusions that you hear on TV and just accept them as true, or from a political party like hurricanes being steered to a particular place on the planet. By reading books, you become a deeper thinker. And by becoming a deeper thinker, you become less gullible. And the whole purpose of Common Core has been for your children to become good little worker bees for the Fortune 500, to question nothing, to take the spoon-fed information and provide good worker bee analysis of the current situation for the employer, and never come up with the idea that could compete against the employer and put the employer out of business as an entrepreneur. That's what Common Core has done. And there are private schools and public schools in this country to this day who have embraced Common Core. They've decided to get rid of old math for new math. They've decided to get rid of actually reading books cover to cover for the synopses and the articles. And it is going to be a long-term disaster for your kids, because your kids are not going to be able to be thoughtful entrepreneurs. They're going to be automatons working always for someone else. Your child will never even have the opportunity to be their own boss, let alone someone else's boss, in a Common Core system, because the entirety of the system is designed to suck creativity and entrepreneurship out of your child and just make them worker bees. And I don't care for those of you trying to call and defend Common Core, because we're seeing it play out in real world applications now. Like, for example, kids who've gone through the schools that use Common Core are now going to college, and they're no longer able to read or write. They're no longer able to stand up and think off the top of their head. They're no longer able to do public speaking skills. Then, by the way, as an aside, this is a great opportunity to recommend classical education schools, where they teach old school grammar like diagramming sentences, and they teach old school math like your child has to memorize 3 times 3 equals 9. Then old school application, and it is head and shoulders. Those kids get into college, and they're the ones running circles around everyone else. I know this firsthand. I'm seeing it with my daughter, who went from a Common Core school to a classical education school, and she struggled at first. And then she made it through, and now she's in college surrounded by kids who went to Common Core schools, and she's doing a great books program where she's able to actually hold a thought, read a book, and understand what characters are, what character development is, and what a plot point is. And so many kids who went to these Common Core schools flat out cannot do it. The problem is Common Core, and we should not forget it has corrupted our kids and broken their brains and separated parents from their kids and the ability to do homework. It's a disaster.